It had been one of those days where the rain never seemed to let up. From the moment I woke up, I could hear the soft patter against the window, like nature's own metronome setting the rhythm for a quiet Friday. I had planned to spend the evening alone, curled up in a blanket with my favorite book, maybe even light one of the candles I'd been saving for a special mood. My mom was out of town for the weekend visiting my aunt, so the house was still and peaceful. I didn't expect any visitors, especially not in this weather. Around 6 in the evening, as I was stirring a pot of pasta for my own dinner, I heard the faint but distinct sound of footsteps splashing on the driveway. At first, I thought it was the mail carrier, but when the knock came, it was too deliberate, too familiar. I dried my hands on a dish towel and opened the front door to find Mr. Harris, my mom's longtime friend, standing there, dripping wet in a raincoat that looked like it had given up the fight hours ago. His glasses were fogged, and his usually neat salt and pepper hair was plastered to his forehead. "Evening, Claire," he greeted with a half-smile, his voice warm but slightly sheepish. "I'm so sorry to drop by unannounced. I was running errands across town, and my car started acting up. I ended up walking a good stretch in the rain, and he trailed off, shifting his grocery bag from one hand to the other. Truth is, I haven't had a bite to eat since breakfast." Something about the way he said it made me instantly move aside. "Come in before you catch pneumonia," I said, stepping back to let him through. The warm air from the house met the damp chill he carried with him, and I could almost hear him exhale with relief. The first thing I noticed once he stepped inside was that the grocery bag he carried wasn't heavy, just a few items inside, including a loaf of bread and a couple of apples. His clothes were damp, and I could see he was shivering slightly despite his attempts to hide it. I motioned toward the kitchen. "Sit down. I'll make you something hot. Soup sound okay?" His face lit up as though I'd offered him a ticket to somewhere tropical. That would be wonderful. I didn't want to impose, but his stomach growled faintly, and we both laughed. As I started gathering ingredients from the pantry, vegetable broth, carrots, celery, and a few potatoes, I remembered countless times as a kid when Mr. Harris had helped us out. He was the one who fixed the fence after a storm knocked it down, the one who came over when our car wouldn't start, the one who mowed the lawn when Mom hurt her ankle. He never expected anything in return, so making him a meal felt like the smallest way to repay years of kindness. The scent of simmering vegetables filled the kitchen, mingling with the faint smell of rain from outside. Mr. Harris sat at the table, his hands wrapped around a mug of tea I'd placed in front of him. His eyes followed me as I moved around the kitchen, and he said softly, "This reminds me of when your mom and I were younger. She used to invite friends over just like this, rain or shine. You both have the same way of making people feel welcome." I smiled at that. "I learned from the best," I replied, thinking of Mom's warmth and generosity. We talked while I cooked. He told me about his day, how the car trouble had started miles from home, how he'd tried to find a cafe but most were closed early due to the storm. He had been on his way to bring the groceries to his neighbor, an elderly woman who wasn't able to shop for herself, but the weather slowed him down. Listening to him reminded me of something my mom always said: people who give the most rarely ask for anything. Once the soup was ready, I ladled it into a deep bowl and set it in front of him along with a grilled cheese sandwich I'd thrown together, while the soup simmered. The steam curled upward, carrying the comforting scent of thyme and butter. He took the first spoonful slowly, savoring it, and then smiled in a way that made the entire kitchen feel warmer. "This is better than anything I would have found out there," he said between bites. I didn't realize how hungry I was until now. As he ate, we kept talking, and the conversation drifted into stories from years past. He told me about the time he and Mom had driven through a snowstorm in college to rescue a stranded friend. I told him about my work and how I'd been saving up for a trip I'd been dreaming of for years. After he finished eating, I packed the rest of the soup into a container and slid it across the table. "Take this with you," I said. "You can have it for dinner tomorrow, too." At first, he hesitated. "You sure you won't need it?" "I made plenty," I reassured him. "Besides, I can always make more." When he finally stood to leave, the rain had softened into a gentle drizzle. I walked him to the door, handing him the leftovers along with an umbrella from our stand. As he stepped outside, He turned back, his expression thoughtful. "Claire, you really didn't have to do all this, but you did. I won't forget it." I watched him walk down the driveway, the streetlights casting soft halos on the wet pavement. The umbrella bobbed with his steps, and the container of soup was cradled securely under his arm. Something about that image stayed with me long after I closed the door. That night, as I curled back into my blanket and picked up my book, I found I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept drifting back to the unexpected visit, the simple act of sharing a meal, and how it seemed to transform the evening into something far more meaningful than I had planned. Over the following weeks, Mr. Harris's visit became something of a turning point. Whenever it rained, I'd think of that night and how quickly a quiet evening had turned into a moment of connection. We started running into each other more often, at the grocery store, in the park, even once at the library. Each time, he'd bring up that meal and how it had brightened a dreary day. One Sunday afternoon, a couple of months later, he stopped by again, this time with a basket of fresh vegetables from his garden. "Thought I'd repay the favor," he said with a grin. We ended up making another pot of soup together, laughing as we chopped carrots and swapped stories. It wasn't about the food, though. It was about the shared time, the comfort in knowing that someone thought of you enough to show up with something warm, something fresh, something made with care. Looking back now, I realize that night taught me something important. You never know how much a small act of kindness can mean to someone. Sometimes it's just soup and a sandwich on a rainy evening, but other times, it's a reminder that we're not alone in the world. That people care. That even unplanned moments can turn into memories worth keeping. And so, whenever the rain begins to fall, I put the kettle on, just in case someone shows up at my door, hungry, tired, and in need of a little warmth. Because if I learned anything from Mom and from Mr. Harris, it's that you don't need a reason to open your home or your heart. You just do it. And sometimes, you'll be surprised at what happens next.